Welcome everyone to this webinar, Navigating the IVDR Landscape, a guide to device classification and requirements. My name is Adam van Loon and I'm a technical file reviewer at DECA. In this webinar, I will give you some basic information regarding starting the IVDR certification process of your device and information on the latest amendment. During this webinar, the microphones will be muted. However, if you have any questions during this webinar, please ask them in the chat box and my colleagues will answer them during the webinar. At the end of the presentation, I can also discuss some of the questions live. Please note that we're not allowed to perform any kind of consulting, and the webinar will be recorded and made available afterwards. In this webinar, I will first give a short introduction on the IVDR and where you should actually start when you want your device to be CE marked. Next, I'll go into classification of devices and requirements per risk class. I will talk about sampling of devices. And last, I will talk about the latest amendment and the changed transitional periods. On May 26, 2017, the IVDR entered into force. 5 years later, the IVDR was implemented, so the rules started to apply. However, 3 amendments have been published in the official journal of the European Union to extend the time for products to be certified for the IVDR. At the end of the presentation, I will talk a bit more on the timelines that were now mentioned in the last amendment. So with the introduction of the IVDR, there are a lot of changes compared to the IVDD. So for example, the classification of IVDs is now into 4 risk classes, and this results in a lot more IVDs that now fall under a notified body. Almost no devices are self-certified anymore, and due to this change, it's a whole other work field for manufacturers now. Other important changes are a more precise description of analytical and clinical performance of your device. The post-market surveillance is a lot more elaborate, and the traceability of IVDs is increased, for example, by using UDI. All in all, this results in a lot more requirements for manufacturers, for importers and distributors, but also for notified bodies. The goal of the IVDR is to result in a better protection of public health and patient safety. As mentioned before, with the implementation of the IVDR, more devices now need the involvement of a notified body. But what does a notified body actually do? So we check if everything is conform to regulations. And if that is the case, then you as a manufacturer can put the CE mark on your product and place it on the European market. To check if everything is in order, we assess the technical documentation and we visit the manufacturer during audits. If both have a positive advice, then the CE certification is possible. So we have now this big IVDR and these rules, but where should you start? So our advice would be to start with a clear intended use of your device. In the IVDR Annex 1, GSPR 20.4.1c, it is described what should be present in the intended purpose. So for example, it should mention what is detected or measured, the function of the device, and whether, for example, what the type of specimen is. So make sure that you describe in your intended use every point that is described in this GSPR. The next step would be to check if your device is indeed an in vitro medical device. In the IVDR Article 2, there are a lot of definitions, and in Article 2.2, there is the definition of an IVD. So check if your device actually is an IVD according to this definition. Shortly said, an IVD is an examination of specimens derived from the human body and which provides information on one of the following, and then it's A to F. So for example, if your device would examine DNA, but it's for ancestry, then actually ancestry does not fall under point A to F, and it is not it does not qualify as an IVD. Also important is to make sure that you check up front if your device is an IVD or if it's actually an accessory for an IVD. And again, there's a definition in Article 2.4 on what is an accessory of a device. The other useful guidelines that can help you is, for example, MDCG 2024-11. It's a recent guideline, and it gives you some guidance on checking if your device is indeed an IVD, yes or no. And also there is a manual which looks at borderline cases between, for example, the IVDR and the MDR, and which of the two your device would then be. And this you can also find on the website of the MDCG. So we have now our intended use. We know it's an IVD. Next step is to look at the correct classification. According to the IVDR, there are now 4 different risk classes. And looking at it in high overview, we have the Class A devices. These are low-risk products. We have the Class B devices. These are limited risk products. The Class C devices are high-risk products where failure could lead to life-threatening situations or severe disabilities. And we have the highest risk class, Class D. These are for critical products, often in relation with transfusion, transplantation, or propagation. Within these risk groups, there are also sort of special groups. So we have the self-testing devices. These devices are at least Class C with a few exceptions. We have near-patient testing devices. These are classified in their own right. And we have companion diagnostics, and these are at least Class C devices. Another special group, I think, is the software group. Because the classification of software is also like a special world in the world of medical devices. And an MDCG guideline, so 2019-11, has been published, especially regarding this classification of software. In this MDCG, there are several flow schemes. For example, there's a flow scheme to determine whether the software falls under the IVDR or under the MDR. I will not go into detail on classification of software and software itself, because as I said, it's a world of its own, but just be aware that there is this guidance which you can use. According to IVDR classification rules, if we look at that, then the software which drives or influences the use of a device shall fall within the same class of the device. However, if the software is independent of any device, then it should be classified in its own right. Also good to realize, if you have artificial intelligence incorporated in your device, this does not influence the IVDR classification of the device. So it's not that your device is suddenly in a higher risk class if you use artificial intelligence. Though be aware the Artificial Intelligence Act regulation is now published, so you should take that one in account as well. So in the IVDR, there are the classification rules stated, and you can find them in Annex 8. And And also there is a guidance, so 2020-16, that guidance shows several examples under which examples of devices that then fall under a certain classification rule. So here I provide you a simplified scheme of how these classification rules work. So you start with rule number 1 and you think, okay, does my device detect a transmissible agent for transplantation-related issues or for which causes life-threatening disease with high risk of propagation? Or does my device determine infectious load of a life-threatening disease? If that's the case, your device is a Class D device. If not, you go to rule number 2. This is for devices intended for blood or tissue compatibility typing. If that's the case, does your device check high-risk blood groups? So, for example, the ABO system. If yes, it's a Class D device. If it is intended for blood or tissue compatibility typing, but not for high-risk blood groups, so for example for HLA typing, then it's considered a Class C device. If rule 2 does not apply, we'll go to rule number 3. This is a quite extensive rule with different, let's say, sub-rules. And you check if your device falls under one of these rules. So, for example, if you have a device that detects sexually transmitted diseases or prenatal screening, then it's considered a Class C device. This is all not the case. We'll go to rule number 4. Is your device a self-testing device? Yes. Does it detect pregnancy, or maybe does it detect glucose in urine? If this is not the case, then the self-testing device is considered a Class C device. If it does actually detect pregnancy or glucose in urine, then it's considered a Class B device. So be aware that if it's a self-testing device and it detects glucose in blood, it's considered Class C. Is it a self-testing device and it detects glucose in urine? It's considered a Class B device. If it's not a self-testing device, we'll go to rule number 5. This is for products for general laboratory use, for instruments or specimen receptacles. If that's the case, it's a Class A device. If it's not the case, then it's rule 6, and rule 6 is actually for devices that are not covered by any of the other rules. Then it's a Class B device. And for rule number 7, that's for controls without a quantitative or qualitative assigned value, then it's a Class B device. Like I said, this is a simplified scheme, so it's very important to go to Annex 8 and just check if every rule is applicable to your device, yes or no. Also check the implementing rules mentioned in Annex 8. For example, one of these implementing rules is that the control materials with a quantitative or qualitative assigned value, these shall be classified in the same class of the device. Another implementing rule is that if several classification rules apply to the same device, then the higher classification applies to your device. It's good to realize that actually the intended purpose determines the risk classification, and it's not only the analyte. So, for example, here hepatitis B. If you would have a device that detects hepatitis B on blood donations, for example, so for transplantation-related issues, then it's actually a Class D device. But if it's a device that detects hepatitis B, but then for sexually transmitted diseases, then it's considered a Class C device. So this also shows you how important it is to have a clear intended use, because that also determines the risk classification. So the reason why this classification is so important, because it depends what kind of requirements or criteria or documents are necessary. So here's a very high overview of what is necessary, and we will go into detail into the next slides. But I hope you can already see that how higher the risk class, the more requirements are necessary. So let's start with Class A devices. So Class A devices do not need a notified body, and they can be self-certified. However, if you have a sterile Class A device, then the notified body is involved, but it is limited to aspects related to sterilization and the maintenance of sterility. In both cases, QMS of a technical dossier is necessary, and also in both cases, the QMS should be compliant to the IVDR. You can use for this a certificate for the medical QMS standard ISO 13485. This is not obligatory, however, it is recommended. Then if we go to the Class B devices, we have two. So we have the normal Class B devices, but we have also the Class B devices that are self or near patient testing devices. Both cases, a notified body is involved and a technical dossier should be ready, should be made, and the QMS should be compliant to the IVDR. For the normal Class B devices, then the sampling of devices is possible. However, for the self or near patient testing devices, all files should be checked, so sampling is not possible. For self-testing devices, it is expected that the performance of the device is also checked by the layperson. And for near patient testing, the device should be checked in the environment that it is intended to use. So for example, if your device is used in an ambulance, then the performance should also be checked when the device is in an ambulance. For Class C devices, we have a new category, and that's the companion diagnostics. For all Class Cs, a notified body should be involved, technical dossier is necessary, and a QMS. Also here, sampling is possible for normal Class C devices, but for self, near patient testing, or companion diagnostic, sampling is not possible. Also here, so layperson and environmental testing is expected for self near patient testing, and for companion diagnostic, EMA consultation is necessary, and EMA stands for the European Medicines Agency. Also, Class C devices need a summary of safety and performance. If we look at Class D devices, the scheme actually looks the same. The only difference is that also for normal Class D devices, sampling of devices is not possible, and all files are checked. Class D devices also have additional requirements. So for the normal Class Ds, for the self near patient testing, and for the companion diagnostics, performance testing needs to be done. And this is performed by the EU reference lab, and often this is based on common specifications. These common specifications are also published by the European Commission. And an example of a common specification can be, for example, that the diagnostic sensitivity should be over 95% and should be tested in 100 samples. So these EU reference labs, these check actually the performance claims that the manufacturer makes. So they check if the diagnostic sensitivity is indeed higher than 95%. For the following Class D devices that are mentioned in the orange square are so for example Class D devices for hepatitis and retroviruses. There an EU reference lab has been designated by the European Commission. However, this is not the case for all Class D devices, so this is still a work in progress. However, even though there's not yet an EU reference lab available, you can already certify these devices and start applying at the notified bodies. Another point for Class D devices is you may need to have expert panel involvement, and this is in the case for the Class D devices where no common specifications are available, and when the device is considered to be the first certification of that type. MDCG 2021-22 can provide you a bit more guidance on this. The opinions of this expert panel are published on the website of the European Commission. This is sometimes a little bit hard to find, so that's why the link is included here. And post-certification, then batch verification should be done for the Class D devices. And also this is done by these EU reference labs. And more details you can find in MDCG 2022-3. If we then look at post-market surveillance, so for Class A, B, C, and D, they all need a system for post-market surveillance. So what is included? What does that entail? So you need a post-market surveillance plan and a post-market performance follow-up plan, so PMPF plan. As a result, for Class A and B, you get a PMPF evaluation report and post-market surveillance report, and these are updated when needed. For Class C and D, you also get a PMPF evaluation report, but here you get a periodic safety update report, and this one is updated at least annually. Also good to realize is that this periodic safety update report for Class D devices, this is also being sent to the notified body. So all the plans and the reports, these are actually part of the technical documentation. We have a next webinar planned where we will go more into detail on the post-market surveillance of system in the IVDR. Next, I'll talk a bit more on the sampling of devices. So there is an MDCG guideline, so 2019-13, which provides you some more guidance on sampling. And so if more than one device falls under the same group, then sampling of device might be applicable. So how are these groups made? So I hope you still remember, as I said, for Class B and Class C devices, sampling is possible. However, it's not applicable for companion diagnostic, near-patient testing, or self-testing. So for Class B, these groups can be sampled based on category of devices. And this is made on the IVDR code. And the IVDR code reflects the design and intended purpose of the device. So if you would, for example, have multiple devices that determine, for example, allergies, then they would all fall on the IVDR 0603. And these devices can be maybe sampled. For Class C devices, the sampling is based on the generic device group, and this generic device group consists of the EMDN code and the IVP code. And the EMDN code can be looked up at the website below. And third level means 1 letter and 4 numbers. And then look at which category your device group fits best. You also need the IVP code, and this code describes the examination procedure. So for example, there's an IVP code for microscopy or radioactivity or immunoassays. And these IVP codes can be found in the same document as the IVDR codes. So now we know how these groups are formed. And then how does the process work, let's say. So for certification, one of the files will be reviewed. And then in the next years, the other files will be checked. And this is also something called surveillance. And then all technical dossiers from different devices that will be on the certificate should be ready, because the notified body decides which file he or she wants to review. So then the files should be ready, so you can send them also to the notified body. What is also possible is to add a device to an existing certificate as part of the group. So think about the strategy you can use. So if it's maybe possible, think if sampling is maybe a possibility. And if you would like to use this strategy and maybe just add them later to the certificate. Also, if we're talking about strategy, think how you will build up your file. So will you include your controls within one file, or will you make this a separate file? So next year we are planning to have a webinar that goes more into examples of this strategy planning. Our last topic will be on the recent extension, and this is the second significant postponement. And here the European Union has decided to grant additional time for the implementation of the IVDR. So on the 9th of July, this amendment was published, and with this new amendment, the dates until which devices certified under the IVDD can be placed on the market or put into service, these dates have been extended. This extension time depends on the presence of an IVDD certificate, or in case of self-declared IVDD devices, on the IVDR classification of the device. So we have two situations, and I'll start with situation 1. This is for devices with an IVDD certificate, so Annex 2, List A, List B, and self-test, that were issued from 25th of May 2017, and that was still valid on 26th of May 2022, and it should not be withdrawn. So if your certificate was still valid on the 9th of July this year, so the date of publication of the amendment, then your QMS should be in compliance with the IVDR from 26th of May 2025. And the application should be lodged with a notified body before 26th of May 2025. The agreement signed with the notified body should be before 26th of September 2025. And then the product can be placed on the market or put into service until 31st of December 2027. If your certificate was not valid on the 9th of July, then before the expiry date of the certificate, you should have had an application and a written agreement at a notified body for the device or a substitute of the device. If that's the case, you can follow the below route. If that was not the case, then the competent authority should have granted a derogation following IVDR 54 article. If that's the case, you can follow the below route. If that's not the case, then the competent authority should have required the manufacturer, in accordance with the IVDR Article 92, to carry out the applicable conformity assessment procedure. If that's the case, again, you can follow the below route. If that's not the case, then I'm afraid no extension is possible. The other situation 2, is for devices with no notified body involvement under the IVDD and which had a declaration of conformity drawn up prior to 26th of May 2022. Then they look at the classification of devices under the IVDR. So that's again why it's important to have a correct classification of your device. For all the different risk classes, the QMS should be in compliance with the IVDR from 26th of May 2025. The application should be lodged with the notified body before 26th of May 2025 for Class D devices. For Class C devices is 26th of May 2026, and for Class B and A sterile it's 26th of May 2027. An agreement should be signed with a notified body 4 months later, and then the product can be placed on the market or put into service for Class D devices until the 31st of December 2027. It's 1 year later for Class C devices, and for Class B and A sterile, it's 31st of December 2029. However, in order to make use of the extension, certain conditions should be met by the manufacturer. So, the device should continue to comply with the requirements of the IVDD. There should be no significant changes in design and intended purpose of the device, and MDCG 2022-6 provides more guidance as to what is regarded a significant change. Devices should not present an unacceptable risk to the health or safety of patients, users, or other persons, or to other aspects of the protection of public health. As shown before, the manufacturer's QMS should be in compliance with the IVDR before 26th of May 2025. And post-market surveillance, market surveillance, vigilance, and registration of economic operators and devices shall be already in compliance with the IVDR. And as shown in the previous slides, an application should be lodged and an agreement signed between the manufacturer and the notified body by a specific date. Then the documents that are involved in this with this amendment. So for devices with an IVDD certificate, so Annex 2, List A, List B, and self-tests, you would need an extension agreement. So that's an agreement between the notified body and the manufacturer, and it mentions that the conditions are met, that the notified body will continue surveillance activities, and that the manufacturer will continue to report changes or adverse events. Another document is the transfer of appropriate surveillance agreement. So you would need this document if you would change a notified body. So this is actually an agreement between both notified bodies and the manufacturer. The old notified body will perform the surveillance activities, and then in 2025, the new notified body will take over these responsibilities, which will not be later than 26th of September 2025. Please be aware that surveillance activities are not necessary for IVD devices that did not need a notified body involvement under the IVDD. And there are two other documents. These are not obligatory, but it's sometimes asked by third parties. And these documents are for devices with IVDD certificate, but can also be for self-declared IVDD devices. So it's a confirmation letter. So this is a list of the IVDD devices for which an IVDR agreement was signed and for which the notified body will carry out continued surveillance if applicable. And the notified body can provide you with this. Another document is a self-declaration for devices covered by the extension. So MedTech Europe here made a template for this, and to provide evidence that your legacy device then benefits from the extension of the transitional period. This template is freely available. You can find it on the MedTech Europe website. So I hope I have showed you today that a clear and correct intended use is actually the basis of your device and also of your technical documentation. If you would like to have more information, we had a previous webinar on the application process at DECA. So if you would be interested in that, please contact the medical.global@deca.com. And we have a next webinar planned, which will be on risk management and post-market surveillance. So keep our LinkedIn website regularly. And other important message is do not postpone your submission to your notified body because time goes by really fast. DECA is open for new customers and it's designated for virtually all IVD devices. And currently we have no waiting list and we can serve you immediately. So this was the end of the presentation. I hope it has given you a basis of how to start with the CE marking of your device. And I'm happy to discuss some of the questions you may have asked.
Ja, nou ben je weg.
So maybe just to add, there's also a Q&A present of the latest transitional provisions, and you can find this question and answers on the MDCG website. So this is done by the European Commission. And also not mentioned in the amendment, also two other topics were mentioned there. One of them is to report to the authorities when you expect there's an interruption of supply of your device. And also here recently a Q&A was published on this. And also this is on the website of the MDCG. And the other topic is on the gradual rollout of UDEMET. So there was one question that when a legal manufacturer orders custom-made materials for the device from a CMO, then which information should the legal manufacturer actually need to have and put in their technical dossier? So in this case, the CMO is then the critical subcontractor. And it really depends on the type of material, what is necessary to have in your TD file. So minimum, you would need to have a copy of the certificate. So for example, if you would have an antibody from another manufacturer, then you probably would need less information because the performance of the antibody is already addressed in the device itself. So you're looking at the performance of the device, and then you have also the performance of the antibody. You might need some information about biological safety. But if the material, for example, would be control material or the control of your device, then you would probably need more information, like, for example, shelf life information, but also performance data. So then you would need more information. I don't know if there are any more questions. You can always reach out to DECA if you have any questions. And I would like to thank you for joining me at this webinar, and I hope to see you in one of our next webinars. Thank you.